All right, well, let's get started, everyone. Like I said, welcome virtually here to the National Constitution Center. Today we are celebrating President's Day with some special presidential trivia. So we're going to learn more today about the executive office, our past presidents, and also some of their parties and platforms, and also how the role of the president is listed in the Constitution. So let's see, we're going to test our knowledge about what we already know, and hopefully we will learn more today as we go along. My name is Angela. I'm one of the educators here at the museum. And today I will be your Alex Trebek, your Steve Harvey. So bear with me here today while we make our way through our trivia. The way that it's going to work, we are going to have 5 categories. Each category will have 5 questions, bringing us to a grand total of 25 questions. This is all in good fun, so there is no need to be incredibly competitive. We can be as competitive as we like because it's all just for fun, and we will see how well we do here today. So give me a moment while I prepare to share my screen so that we can see our questions, and we will get started. All right, so here today we have our Hail to the Chief of the game of presidential trivia. And like I said, we're going to get started here with our first round, round 1, of course. This category is going to be the first president. So we're going to be looking at questions about presidential firsts. We have our trendsetters in here. These will be the presidents who have done things first and are going to kind of pave the way for us. So let's take a look. First question, first round. Let's get right into it. Who was the first person elected president of the United States? Feel free to drop your answers in the chat when you think you have it, and we can lock it in by putting it in the chat. Our options here today are A, Benjamin Franklin, B, George Washington, and C, John Adams. Give it just a couple seconds for everybody to lock in their answers. All right, seems like we're doing pretty well here in the chat. Seems like maybe we know this one. We maybe have our history teachers to thank for this one. All right, seems like we have come to a consensus. So it is indeed B, George Washington, who will be the first president elected in the United States. He is going to be unanimously elected, and as I'm sure you can imagine, is going to be the only president to be unanimously elected. But he is going to set a number of precedents that we still follow today, some of these traditions. And being that he is the first one, he is going to certainly leave a lot to live up to. Moving right along then, question number 2 here. Who was the first president to represent the Republican Party? A, Abraham Lincoln, B, Ulysses S. Grant, or C, Benjamin Harrison? When you think you know it, drop it in that chat there to lock in your answer. All right, I see somebody has put in Ronald Reagan. Not quite right. He's not even one of our options, but I like the way you think. So it looks like we have a number of answers rolling in here. It is indeed A, Abraham Lincoln. He will be the first president to represent the Republican Party, our 16th president. And now, of course, since we found out who the first president to represent the Republican Party was, we, of course, have to figure out who was the first president to represent the Democratic Party. Our options here are A, Thomas Jefferson, B, Andrew Jackson, or C, James Buchanan. Once you think you know it, feel free to drop A, B, or C in that chat. All right, I'm seeing some A's. Let's see, what will it be? B, Andrew Jackson would be the first president to represent the Democratic Party. Steam rolling right along here. Who was the first president to travel outside of the United States while in office? Was it A, James K. Polk, B, Theodore Roosevelt, or C, Woodrow Wilson? This one's a pretty interesting one. I'm not sure that many of us are going to know this one, so surprise me and let me know if you know it. I knew I would get some of you. Yeah, this one's a bit tough, huh? But it seems like a couple of our friends in the chat do, in fact, know it. It is B, Theodore Roosevelt, who would be the first president to travel outside of the U.S. while in office. Way to go, Teddy. Who was the first president born after the Declaration of Independence? A, James Monroe, B, John Quincy Adams, or C, Martin Van Buren? Now, as we are all American history scholars here, of course, I won't have to remind you, but just in case we need a little refresher, the Declaration of Independence is going to be approved in Independence Hall on July 4th of 1776. So this is going to have to be somebody who was born after July 4th, 1776. So if anybody's an expert on presidential birthdays, that might narrow it down for you. All right, we've got some votes here for John Quincy Adams, but it is actually C. Martin Van Buren, this beautiful man with his lovely mutton chops, is going to be the first president born after the Declaration of Independence. Well, we just swept away that category right there. Seems like we're doing really well so far. Let me know if you are keeping up. Tell me how many out of 5 you got correct in the chat. I'm really excited to see that we seem to be doing well based on these answers that we're locking in here. So to keep moving forward, we have here our second category, round 2, of course, which will be the last president. So just as before with the first president, this will be the last president to do these things. So this one's going to be the one who ends it all, who's going to take care of these traditions for us, will be the latest one to do these things. All right, our first question, who was the last president to be inaugurated in Philadelphia? A, George Washington, B, John Adams, or C, Thomas Jefferson? Now, this one's a bit of a head scratcher here. We've got our 3 earliest presidents here. Who could it be? All right, some people are seeming to think that George Washington is the only president to be inaugurated in Philadelphia, but not quite. It's actually going to be B, John Adams. So we have had 2 presidents inaugurated here in the great city of Philadelphia. I think we should bring it back, right? All right. Which era of good feelings president was the last to win every possible state in the Electoral College? A, James Monroe, B, Franklin Roosevelt, or C, Ronald Reagan? For my friend who had guessed Ronald Reagan earlier when he was not an option, now he is an option. This is going to be a pretty incredible feat, like we had with George Washington, who was unanimously elected. You don't often hear about presidents winning every possible state in the Electoral College. So this is going to be a pretty impressive accomplishment. So who can lay claim to this accomplishment? It is actually A, James Monroe. This is a little known fact. Often James Monroe gets kind of forgotten there. He's in between, our earliest, our founding era of presidents. And as we move forward in American history, people tend to forget about him a little bit. But I think he deserves all that attention for winning every possible state in the Electoral College. Who was the last former Secretary of State to be elected president? A, Martin Van Buren, B, James Buchanan, or C, Gerald Ford? It used to be believed back in early American history that it was like the Secretary of State was kind of like the next in line to be president. But today we know that's not quite how that works out anymore. So the last former Secretary of State to be elected president would actually be B, James Buchanan. James Buchanan is actually our only president from Pennsylvania as well. Pretty interesting facts we have going on here. All right, next up, who was the last president to represent the Whig Party? A, William Henry Harrison, B, Zachary Taylor, or C, Millard Fillmore? What do we think? William Henry Harrison, Zachary Taylor, or Millard Fillmore? This Whig Party, of course, is a name for a political party and not the thing you wear on your head. All right, it would be C, Millard Fillmore, who would be the last president to represent the Whig Party. We don't often hear about the Whig Party, but there are a number of parties in American history. We have, of course, the Federalists, the Democratic Republicans, the Whigs. We actually had a party called the Free Soil Party, the Green Party. So we've had a number of interesting parties crop up throughout American history. All right, our last question for this category is, who was the last president born in the 1800s? A, Harry Truman, B, Dwight Eisenhower, or C, Lyndon Johnson? Who was the last president born in the 1800s? Let's see, what do we think? All right, I see a lot of votes here for Harry Truman, but it's actually going to be B, Dwight Eisenhower, who would be our last president born in the 1800s. All right, well, that's going to close out round 2. I hope we are having fun so far. Let me know how you did in that last round out of 5 in the chat. So I can see how we're keeping along here, but it seems like we are all ready to move forward. So let's kick off round 3 here, which is going to be the only president. This will be the only president to have ever done these things. So this will be a pretty interesting round. Let's see. Question 1. Who is the only person to serve more than 2 terms as president of the United States? A, Ulysses S. Grant, B, Theodore Roosevelt, or C, Franklin Roosevelt? We got our 2 Roosevelts there. That can get kind of confusing. So a lot of people think of the 2 terms as having been part of the Constitution, but actually it was not. It was just kind of a tradition that presidents had followed based on George Washington's example. But every president is going to serve 2 terms, or at maximum 2 terms, until we get up to this man, C, Franklin Roosevelt, who would actually be elected to 4 terms. And it's after he's elected to his 4th term that we get the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which is going to officially establish that presidents can only serve a maximum of 2 terms. Who is the only person to serve 2 non-consecutive terms as president? Is it A, Franklin Pierce, B, Grover Cleveland, or C, Benjamin Harrison? We have this fabulous imagery in our museum here. We have a presidential portrait wall, and it features portraits of, as you guessed it, the president. And this man is going to be the only one to have his portrait featured twice because he served 2 non-consecutive terms. And this lovely man whose face we get to see multiple times is going to be B, Grover Cleveland. Yes, we have that mustache on our wall twice. All right. Who is the only person to have been elected president and vice president twice? A, John Adams, B, Richard Nixon, or C, George H.W. Bush? All right, seems we have a number of people in the chat here who are familiar with this one. It is B, Richard Nixon, who would be the only president to have been elected president and vice president twice. Pretty impressive, Nixon. Who is the only person to serve as president and vice president without being elected to either office? A, Millard Fillmore, B, Andrew Johnson, or C, Gerald Ford? Only person to serve as president and vice president without being elected to either office. Quite an interesting accomplishment, but it seems like we know it here. This one is, in fact, going to be C, Gerald Ford. Fantastic. Way to go, friends in the chat. Who is the only president to serve 2 full terms without using a veto? A, George Washington, B, Thomas Jefferson, or C, George W. Bush? All right, so a veto, if we're unfamiliar, means that a president is able to reject a bill that comes through Congress. So he's able to say, no, I don't approve, and it goes back to Congress, and they have to work together again to see if it's something they do, in fact, want to pass. Pretty interesting. And it's actually going to be B, Thomas Jefferson, who will serve his 2 full terms without ever using a presidential veto. So that will take us to the close of round 3. Round 4 is going to be on our platforms and policies. So let's look at what these presidents have wanted to do during their time in office. Which president promised a new deal for the American people? We have here Woodrow Wilson for A, B, Warren Harding, or C, Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, and we seem pretty confident on this one in the chat. Seems like our American history teachers have done a good job teaching us this one. It is C, Franklin Roosevelt. This New Deal is going to be part of the policies that are going to be enacted during the Great Depression. Which president told the audience to, quote, read my lips, no new taxes, at the Republican National Convention in 1988? That date there might help you narrow it down. We have here A, Gerald Ford, B, George H.W. Bush, and C, George W. Bush. We have both George the father and George the son listed here. And it would be B, George the father, George H.W. Bush, who would say, read my lips, no new taxes. Which president's opposition to the Second Bank of the United States was central to his re-election? Was it A, James Madison, B, Andrew Jackson, or C, John Tyler? Which president had a problem with the Second Bank of the United States? Yes, it would be B, Andrew Jackson, who is going to run for re-election based on his opposition to the Bank of the United States. Which president's Great Society policies included Medicare, Medicaid, and the Voting Rights Act? A, Franklin Roosevelt, B, Harry Truman, or C, Lyndon Johnson? That last part there might help you out if you're stumped. The Voting Rights Act, if anybody's familiar with when that is from, that might help you narrow down your choices here. All right, I'll give you a further hint. This Voting Rights Act is from 1965. So that would make it C, President Lyndon Johnson, who's going to run on these Great Society policies. Which president campaigned for re-election in 1916 with the slogan, "He kept us out of war"? A, Woodrow Wilson, B, Warren Harding, or C, Calvin Coolidge? 1916, re-election. He kept us out of war. What war, I wonder? Well, it seems like you guys are not stumped by this one at all. Yes, it is A, Woodrow Wilson. This is going to be during World War I. He is going to be campaigning and saying that he kept us out of war. Not for very long, but he did, in fact, in his first term, keep us out of war. All right, so that'll close out round 4. We have one left, just 5 more questions. Let's finish this up here. The presidency and the Constitution. So we're going to be looking all at Article 2 here of the Constitution. Who officially elects the President of the United States? Is it A, we the people, B, the Board of Elections, or C, the Electoral College? Who officially elects the president? All right, this one is actually going to be C, the Electoral College. Yes, we the people, of course, cast our ballots for the president in the popular election, and then that is how electors are chosen in the Electoral College, which is who officially certifies the election of the president. How many electoral votes are contested during each presidential election? A, 435, B, 538, or C, 650? If you're good at some quick math here, this number is going to be the total number of representatives in the House of Representatives, plus the number of senators, as well as 3 additional electors for Washington, D.C. So if we're good at some math there, that'll bring us up to 538. We had some guesses here that were pretty high in the thousands, but there's not quite that much room in Congress for all that many people. So there is 538 electoral votes that are contested during each election. If no candidate wins a majority of the electoral votes, who selects a winner from the top 3 candidates receiving electoral votes? Would it be A, the House of Representatives, B, the Senate, or C, the Supreme Court? I like the confidence we have in the chat here. Some people are saying that they are the ones who would be selecting the winner. All right, this is going to help you narrow it down here. It is going to come from Congress, but which part of Congress? It's going to be A, the House of Representatives. Believe it or not, when the founders wrote this part of the Constitution, they actually thought that this was going to get a lot more use. They thought that these elections would be a lot more contested, and they thought the majority of elections would actually be decided in the House. What supermajority is needed in both the House of Representatives and the Senate in order to override a veto by the president? A, 9/16, B, 2/3, or C, 3/4? So this is a bit about what we were talking about earlier, that the president has the ability to send a bill back to Congress and say that he will not sign it into law. But if both the House and Senate get this supermajority, this fraction, they are able to override his veto and pass this bill anyway. It is going to be B, 2/3, 2/3. President Andrew Johnson is going to be the one with the most vetoes overridden by Congress. He'll have about 16 of them overridden, which is pretty impressive considering it takes such a supermajority to do that. All right, our last question here for all of the life bonus points. Prior to the 20th Amendment, on which day did inaugurations take place? Was it A, March 4th, B, April 30th, or C, July 4th? If anybody needs some context, today we celebrate Inauguration Day on January 20th. But this is, of course, after the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. So prior to the 20th Amendment, Inauguration Day was actually on March 4th. On March 3rd in 1913, there was a women's march to show support for women's suffrage, which was going to take place on March 3rd of 1913, with the idea of getting all of the press coverage for Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. The women marching for suffrage would end up on the front page, and Woodrow Wilson's inauguration would come in second fiddle to their procession. All right, fantastic. Let me know how well you did in the chat. Let me know if you have had fun today playing our trivia. I hope you have, and that you've also learned a lot about this executive office and have enjoyed learning more about these presidents that we are celebrating here today on President's Day. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We can hang out here for another couple of moments just to see if any of our friends have any questions. While you ponder your questions, I'm just going to shamelessly plug our other educational programs that we have here at the museum. So even though today is President's Day and we are coming to the close of our President's Day celebrations, there are still a number of things that are happening here at the center, both online and in person throughout the rest of the month in celebration of Black History Month. We have a number of scholar talks and live constitutional classes and exhibit tours, all focused on that celebration of African American history. All right, it seems like we do not have any questions in the chat, so I'm going to wrap up here today. Again, I thank you all so much for spending part of your President's Day here with me, learning a bit more about this executive office, and I hope to see you in the future, both in person and online here at the National Constitution